Everybody, my name is Tim Schultz. I'm from Business for South Africa. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. I'm sure that Friday afternoon there's a lot of competition for what you might be doing, either work-wise or family-wise, or heaven forbid, even some relaxation. We will run through today's program at a steady clip, I hope. I'll put that up in a second. Just as a general rule, could I ask please that if you're not speaking to turn off your cameras? It does increase the bandwidth that is used, and obviously remain on mute. We've got over 100 people today, so it is going to be a bit difficult to manage shout out questions, but we will of course deal with those on the chat. Let me quickly put up what we are planning to do today. So as you will have seen, we are what we're calling the demand side challenge and the role of brands. That's why we are all here. And the fundamental logic to this is that there's no resumption of our normal lives and livelihoods until we can vaccinate the nation. And we've got quite a lot of material to share with you today. This is how we're going to run the program. Firstly, myself and Casper Vadia will speak to you just about why we are here. Then we'll look at the actual national demand acceleration strategy with David Harrison from the Department of Health, and we'll be able to take a few questions there. Thereafter, we will get into finding the why in vaccination with Andy Rice and Masala Phillips. We'll look at some creative provocations, so what brands are already doing or what they could do. And then we will have a more interactive discussion and consideration about what the next steps are for the industry with Pritesh. I will jump straight in right now as we admit one final person. Cass, perhaps if I could hand over to you for the next slide or two.
To me?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Tom, and thank you to everybody for this, what we consider to be quite an important session. I think most people know that Business for South Africa is a coordinating body mandated to organize South Africa private sector to collaborate with government to roll out the vaccine. We also supported government last year in managing the impact of it. We're not a formal business organization, it's a platform that we put together to involve all of business and not just members of the business in South Africa. We approached a lot of professionals, experts in health, in communications, in media, in the legal fraternity, consultants, to work on a pro bono basis in the national interest, to last year help us manage the pandemic and this year help us roll out the vaccine. And at the height of the pandemic last year, we probably had about 400 people working pro bono on managing the pandemic, doing a lot of work on behavioral change issues, on economic growth issues, post-pandemic economic growth issues, on managing how we manage public transport to limit the spread of the vaccine, on communication issues, and a whole range of other stuff. And we don't have any formal structure, no bank accounts, no contracts, no nothing. It's just a group of people committed in the national interest to make things happen in the COVID space.
Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks.
No, you can take this one as well if you like.
Okay, so we at a stage now where we think that the biggest challenge to the vaccine and the rollout of the vaccine is the challenge. We had a significant issue with the supply side. We've now managed the supply side and we got that right. But the demand side is we're not getting enough people coming for vaccine. We need to find ways and means of looking for appropriate messages to encourage people to vaccinate. We also looking to put into place structures that will begin to take vaccines to the people, and we're working with the Solidarity Fund and others to look at mobile clinics and so on. But the complex communication decisions are essentially on this one. Public CEO vaccination, should they or shouldn't they? In the early stages of the program, we encouraged a number of CEOs to take vaccinations in public, to send us photos so as to encourage people to do it. Vaccine information, there's a lot of information, some pretty good, some pretty lousy and not well informed. We need to pull that together. We need to identify the critical touch points in information to actually get people to vaccinate. We need to understand why the vaccine hesitancy. Some of it is due to socioeconomic. People aren't able to travel, they're not able to afford traveling. Others are uncertainty about the impact of the vaccine, and there are small groups in naysayers. To address those that are uncertain, to address those that are not sure about what the vaccine is and what its impact is, I think we need to demystify the science and explain it properly. And we believe that brands have a role in this as well. And then what sort of national campaign so that we begin to send out the same message across the country. People recognize that message, people recognize the brand, and people recognize and identify the brand with the vaccine. When we show up back to work, when do we go? Is it back to work physically, or is it some sort of hybrid between physical and virtual? How do we promote that? How do we encourage people who are able to go back to work to do so? And what does that mean for the vaccination program? So, I mean, what Discovery has done in the last few days, we actually promote to say that to go back to work, to enjoy your sports events, to enjoy parties and so on, you need to be vaccinated. You get back to, I guess, a semblance of normality, and you can get back to work. And so we need to do some work on fake news. I've talked about that in the vaccine side. There's plenty of fake news. How do we combat that? How do we, through appropriate information and demystifying some of the science, how do we actually combat the fake news? A lot how and when we've said that we've put together public and private sector sites. We have the capacity to probably vaccinate between 300 to 400,000 and maybe more people a day. We've been encouraging the private sector not to roll back their facilities, because the facilities are there, they put infrastructure into place, they're maintaining the infrastructure, but the demand is not coming. And so they are saying that we cannot continue to maintain. So the orders for vaccine from private sector side have significantly because there is a demand. And the public sector side are also not seeing that sort of demand. So how do we roll it out? How do we get people there? When do we get people there? Are there particular people who want to come and more attracted to vaccinate? I think we need to look at that. The role of the Solidarity Fund. The Solidarity Fund, as people would know, is an independent body that was essentially established specifically to assist in the pandemic and now the vaccine rollout. They are prepared to fund.
Cass, you've gone on to mute. Cass, you're still on mute.
Sorry, let me answer. Okay. Okay. And we just need to clarify the relationship between the Solidarity Fund and the work we do, the media work we do. Are they able to fund some of that? And if so, what part of that? And we can go into that. And essentially, it's to change behavior. It's to get people to shake the need to vaccinate, get people appreciate that if you vaccinate, the chances of your getting ill, even if you contract the vaccine, because the vaccination is not guaranteed that you won't contract. But it is the sign that the chances are excellent that you will not get seriously. You will probably not have to go to a hospital. And if you're vaccinated and we sort of convince government to have to get the vaccination certificates that people are given when they're vaccinated, and to make those available in electronic format so that you could actually scan your phone at a machine when you go to a sports event, and you can actually attend that sports event. So we want to change behavior by linking some sense of normality, going to watch sports events, going to gym, going to restaurants, but link that to being vaccinated and encouraging. And to a certain extent, it's not mandatory vaccination, but it's certainly making vaccination a condition of getting some sort of normality. And then there's the legalities of compulsory vaccination. I mean, some people like Hilton Cheeto, who I'm sure a lot of people know and advocate, have done work, and they are convinced that compulsory vaccination would not be contrary to the Constitution because there's a greater public good issue. And the sort of smorgasbord of issues, I guess, that we looking at companies are facing, and certainly business for South Africa are facing. And then where do we get the money from all of this? So we certainly would encourage brand houses to see if they can contribute some of their time. We are also meet with major media houses to see if media can give space on a voluntary basis to some of the branding and some of the outputs of the work you would do. We will have a meeting with the top 20, 30 CEOs who are your clients, and also get them to, from the top, begin to push for some of this work to happen. And that's where we are. That's the plan, and that's why this meeting today. So let me stop. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Cas. So let's look at why vaccination very quickly here, and why it's relevant to you. So COVID-19 and its effects and the restrictions, they harm lives and livelihoods. This we all know. It harms all of your businesses, most of your businesses. Now, until we can get vaccinated, we won't be safe individually, and we won't be able to return to a life without restrictions. That's just the reality of where we are right now. So for the economy to reopen, we've got to vaccinate the nation, or certainly all of the adults. That's over 40 million people that we have to get to do something. So I think the key point we want to make here is that promoting vaccination isn't a CSI issue. It may be, but that's a small element of it. It's in our individual interests, but it's in every business's interests for us to be able to be vaccinated and return to a functional economy. So what else do we have? Where do brands fit in here? Well, I think we just need to step back and consider. COVID-19 affects everybody, all of us. It is the shared experience of our generation. So any brand that is not able to connect with the shared experience of the generation is a brand that risks losing relevance. How you might do that connection would be up to you. But I think just to posit that as a thought. By law, every company actually has to give vaccination information to their staff. It's not an elective, but you can do it well or you can do it badly. But brands can do a lot more than just what they're required to do in law. So we're wanting you to think of incentives, think of the meaning that this whole experience entails and how brands can interpret that. And then say that the persuasive power of brands is multifaceted. Each of the different brands has a different way of engaging with its consumers and a different way of making meaning of our experience. But collectively, your reach dwarfs anything that the central campaigns at the Solidarity Fund and the GCIS and so on, and we'll speak about those a little bit later, can do. So the 100 million, just over 100 million campaign that Solidarity Fund will launch very shortly for all of this, will give really great information. It is dwarfed by the capacity of brands to reach into every facet of people's lives. So in a nutshell, what we're saying is there are national demand campaigns that are coming on stream already there. The Government Communication Information System has one. The Solidarity Fund has one. COVID Comms has one with some great material that you can use. And if at the very least brands can amplify that and affiliate to those campaigns, there's opportunities to do that. There's also creative incentives that you could consider. But if brands really mobilize behind this, then the reach and relevance and the sheer heart of what brands can do will be able to move these 40 million adults, of which only about 12 million so far have taken the vaccination. So we've got a challenge. We've got another 28 million adults, give or take. And that's why we've invited you here today. I will stop now and hand over to David Harrison, who will take you through what that actual national demand strategy is, so you can see what is in place and what is being put into place. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Tim, and thank you to everybody this afternoon. I'm David Harrison. I have been working for the last 6 months in the engine room of the department, trying to support the vaccination program, trying to ensure clarity of strategy. I've now just in the last week been asked to lead the National Demand Acceleration Strategy. I started just out of medical school in the early 90s, founding the Health Systems Trust, which did a lot of the planning for the new health service, spent the 1990s trying to create a new health service out of 17 different health departments. Then HIV struck, and I established and led the Love Life HIV prevention campaign for young people for a decade. Before moving on to focus on early childhood development and other issues. Now I've just been seconded for the past 6 months, as I said, and will be for the next 6 months from my role as the CEO of the D.J. Murray Trust to support what in my lifetime is now the third massive health challenge, moving from the reorganization of healthcare in South Africa through the crisis of HIV, and now into a crisis that is as least of as great proportions as HIV was in the early 2000s. So I come to you not as an expert at all. I always think that those of us who've been through these challenges just understand that we can just glean insights that hopefully enrich our understanding. And that's what I hope to be able to share with you this afternoon. But really thinking that if we can combine the sort of the public health experience, the behavior change understanding from many years in South Africa with the power of brands, with the marketing background, with the incredible experience and affinity that brands have with people in South Africa across all ages, I think that that's where the power is going to lie to actually deal with and conquer COVID infection. So here's our challenge. We have to cross this bar. We have to get to about 70% of the national population. As Tim has said, you know, in a way, what's good here is that what's good for society and good for business both is working in the same direction. There's not a clash of interests here. If we're going to get to a point where society, education, and the economy can open up again, we really have to do two things. First, we have to stop COVID death and disease pretty much in its tracks. And that means focusing on the highest risk groups first. And then secondly, we have to try and cross those thresholds of scale that will, whether it's called herd immunity or viral containment, but we certainly need to know that we need to get to 60, 70, possibly even 80% of the population as quickly as we can to prevent this virus from being able to take hold and to prevent new waves of infection. So as Tim said, this is where we're at today. We've vaccinated about 22% of the entire population. I'm suggesting we need to get to 67, 70. So we're about a third of the way there, which is not insignificant. And the point that I want to make from this graph, just look at the effort required to get people vaccinated, is that we're still in the easy zone. We're actually still in the zone where if we do the basics and do it right, we know that a lot of people are eager and willing and will come forward to be vaccinated. I'm going to suggest to you why I don't think we've made it easy for ourselves, but I do think we're still in the green zone. The amber zone is where people are willing willing and are able to be vaccinated, or they're open to persuasion. And that, I suspect, will get us about another 8 or so percentage points. And then it becomes tough. Then we'll have gone through the sandstone, we will hit the granite, and that's as other factors, particularly socioeconomic factors that people experience, make it difficult for people to access vaccination. And finally, we know that there's a percentage of people that are really unwilling and resistant. But what I'm trying to show here is that I think that there's still a lot of runway if we do the basics and if we understand really what's driving demand. So I've given you a sense, obviously, that we've got to move hell for leather to get 70% of people vaccinated, but not everybody's vaccination counts equally. Doses in the arms of older men count a lot more. This graph here shows the number of deaths averted in the US per million doses of vaccination given. And you can see among people 65 years and over, about 2,400 deaths averted per million doses of vaccine given, roughly half among women. Not that the vaccination is less effective among women, but women are about half as likely to die from COVID than men are. So you can see, just looking at this graph, just how absolutely critical it is that we get to older people first. Stated differently, the vaccination of one man over the age of 65 years of age is equal to vaccinating 100 people 30 to 39. And vaccinating one man over the age of 65 is equivalent to, in terms of deaths averted, to 2 women having got vaccinated. And so the point here is that if we look at hospitalizations averted, and here you can see obviously that the number of hospitalizations is much higher, obviously, than deaths, about four times higher. But you can see here that, again, vaccinating 83 men will prevent 1 admission in 65, if they're 65 years of age. Whereas if we end up vaccinating younger people, we're going to have to vaccinate a heck of a lot more people just to prevent 1 admission. So from an economic point of view, from a societal point of view, we have to focus on older people first. We have to focus on ensuring that men and women come forward for vaccination. Forgive me, there's an error on this next slide that I just quickly want to correct. I didn't realize that had come through. I just want to show you very briefly the experience of learning from international experience. And the color blue on the right is the proportion of the population who've been vaccinated in the United States. And the dark blue means they're fully vaccinated, the light blue means they've had 1 dose, and the gray means that they haven't been vaccinated. and compare that to the much more systematic approach that the United Kingdom adopted, where it started to vaccinate older people first. And the consequence you can see is that in the fourth wave now in the United States, we're seeing a steady increase in the number of deaths compared to that of the United Kingdom, not down to zero, because there's still a significant proportion of people who haven't been vaccinated, and an occasional person who's been vaccinated dies. But it's about, the ratio is about 10 to 1 in terms of the mortality rate now in the UK. 10 unvaccinated people dying for every one who is vaccinated. So that's the
one for every 10 that's vaccinated.
So,
One.
Lantra, you need to come on to mute, please. Thank you. So what precipitated the sort of crisis, if you remember, the Sunday Times article a couple of weeks ago, was that, you know, we'd started vaccinating older people over 60. And this is from week 1 of vaccination through to that stage, week 13. And this is the pattern of vaccinating people over the age of 60, getting up to about 400,000 and then declining. But we were concerned already because that number came down too quickly. It came down when we just vaccinated about 55% of people over 60. We wanted to get to 85%. But of great concern was the fact that as we started to move down into younger age groups, we saw an even faster plateauing, and then sorry, somebody just need to go on mute, please. Thanks. Plateauing and then a steep decline in overall attendance. Now, I am pleased to say that in the last couple of weeks, and I just literally, as I came into this meeting, got some latest figures that suggest that we're pulling back from these figures in the last couple of weeks. But it still remains a concern that we're picking the low-hanging fruits, that we're opening up age groups, that we may well run out of steam and people not come forward. So I think what I'd like to start just take you through a few slides and trying to understand what are the dynamics of this challenge? What is driving people not to pitch up? And I think a lot of focus has been on vaccine hesitancy in a very classical way, almost like an anti-vaxxer type of approach, myths, misconceptions, and that's very important. I'm not suggesting that rebutting those is not critical, but I think we also need to understand that there's a vaccination inertia that's not driven by an absolute desire not to come, but a number of factors that are keeping people away. Now, this is the work done by NIDSCRAM. This is the Wave 5 survey, and showing that 2/3 of our population say that they would come forward to be vaccinated when they're given a chance. Another 10% are very open to persuasion, just a little nudge to get them over the line. Another 10%, it's going to require a lot more hard work, and 14% are not coming forward. And if we look at what that means in terms of the vaccination coverage, we should be able to get to half by just providing support, the right sort of information to people. Then it's going to become harder, and finally getting to that last 10% is going to be really tricky. So what needs to be done? Well, the first thing we need is we need a flood of really high quality information getting into every community. This graph's a bit busy, but all it really shows is that the surveys that have been done by GCIS, and this is now about a month ago, show that most people know how to register, they know what to do to get registered, but they don't know why they must come forward. So there is an information gap. But it's not just information. We also know from the psychology of vaccination that when people are told to register for vaccination, it immediately evokes a question in their mind. Why? Where must I go? What must I do? Is it safe? And if we don't provide the answers, and it's not timely and it's not contextualized and it's not specific to people's lives, what happens is that people fear the worst, they pander to conspiracy theories, and they stay at home. That's old hat psychology. We know that, and we have not done a good job of taking this black box away. Second bit of psychology, it's quite interesting for those of you who know this field, is that if you have a look at the relationship between the size of an anticipated crisis in our lives and the amount of panic or anxiety it evokes, when we think about really, really significant issues of concern in our lives, it does evoke a proportionate amount of anxiety. But when we're confronted by small things in our lives, fairly banal issues, it actually stimulates a higher degree of stress than it should. In other words, we would expect a line at 45 degrees here. We see here that if people are worrying about something new, like vaccination, like having to go to a vaccination site that they've never gone before, what's going to happen when they get there, all of those seemingly banal issues become very significant factors in people's lives and simply create a force in the opposite direction, leading to vaccination inertia. So I've talked about information, I've talked about dealing with anxiety and the need for reassurance. I'd like to show you one more dimension that I think is really important. This is a survey done by University of Johannesburg and HSRC. Again, some cluster analysis done on the respondents, on the population by vaccination intention. And when they did their cluster analysis, the clusters really fell into three main groups. About 60% of the population of cluster A, who are largely poorer people, informal settlements, living in townships, rural areas, they say that they're willing to get vaccinated, compared to just 1/3 of the wealthier, more educated groups. So it looks here that poorer people will just come forward and get vaccinated. But when you then overlaid with some of the other factors in their lives, the calculus of risk that they experience relative to the other risks in their lives, the other hazards they face, the day-to-day challenges, we see that only 39% of them say that they fear COVID infection. So there's a stated willingness, yes, they'll go forward, but it doesn't actually factor hugely in their lives. Compare that to Group C, who say that they won't come forward, yet they fear COVID. So there's this anomaly, there's this sort of cognitive dissonance that we need to find a way to deal with. So the bottom line that I'm trying to convey is that we should not just focus on that 10%. We shouldn't just focus on constantly engaging simply around the myths. There's always a deep well of new conspiracies that come forward. We have to turn that on its head. We have to say vaccinations are safe, but we have to deal with these other factors, the relative perceptions of risk, issues of trust in government, social norms, the real life trade-offs of whether you can get off work, and obviously ultimately the user experience when you pitch up on the day. Is it a positive or an alienating one? So just to come to the last section, really, I think there are only two ways to drive demand. The first is to make vaccination mean more to people, increase the perceived value of vaccination in their lives. And the second is to make it easier to be vaccinated. And we have to focus on those who are most at risk. And so this is how our strategies must surely be built out. So how do we make vaccination mean more to people? Well, I hope I've given you the pointers. I do think that basic information and reassurance is absolutely vital. The type of nudging, behavioral nudging, motivating people, framing it in a positive way, are critical. Ensuring that it is convenient and allowing people to experience a positive user experience to turn them into user champions. This is the virtuous cycle that we need to get right, while at the same time, we make it easier for people to get vaccinated. And that requires us firstly to understand that we can't all do this through national communication. We have to build the system locally. to analyze the problem, to understand why people aren't coming forward. We have to empower local communities to deal with the local dynamics. And as Tim has said, we will need to start to investigate and consider incentives that reduce the opportunity costs that people face and change that calculus. So in summary, I'd like to say that we need to make vaccination mean more, and that requires high visibility. It requires positive association with brands and networks that people trust. We have to flood the market with lots of useful information in people's hands, on their phones, in their stores, on the places of worship. We have to frame the gain. This can't be fear-based. And I have concerns about the stay safe approach. I really think we have to turn this on its head, build a sense of real and imminent possibility in people's lives. Reduce the big anxiety about small things related to vaccination. Make it normal, normalize it in people's lives, and make it about us, ordinary people. Ultimately, people will go and get vaccinated. Why? Because the tiny next door got vaccinated, not because they heard a political talking head on the radio or watched on TV. And then we have to make it easier. We have to make the system easier. I'm busy working on that at the moment. We've got to collapse the registration and vaccination process so that people don't feel like they're waiting for an SMS to come. Next week, we're going to be launching a fresh communication that's really just tells people, just come, don't wait for that SMS. I've spoken about access and then incentives that really can swing the vote by reducing the opportunity costs. So the key strategies that we're embarking on now, and I'm now leading a small team in the national department to try and accelerate demand, is firstly to intensify public leadership. We're hoping that next month there will be a presidential leadership a vaccination weekend, really campaigning for vaccination across the leadership, across all strata of society, and getting the vaccination sites all open, to have a strong collective statement of commitment to vaccinating and support, specific support from companies, from civil society, from labor, from government, about how we can intensify and drive demand. I've spoken about the need for clear and unambiguous communication. We are working on that. There's a lot that you can do to assist us in that regard. The media and marketing campaign platforms, Tim has spoken about the campaign side of it. We now need to leverage retail space, corporate platforms to drive those campaigns to new heights. And then the social mobilization, as I've said, it needs to happen locally. It needs to be embedded in districts. And that really requires the coming together of networks of civil society, business, labor, government locally in district-wide mobilization. And we also need to use our national call center that we put in place for outbound calls, so that we're getting to people that may have registered but haven't yet come forward for vaccination. And then we do have to have a very sophisticated process of social media rebuttal, analytics and rebuttal, and we're getting that underway. And finally, the incentives. There's a lot that can be done in a very short period of time. Incentives both to reduce the costs, but also just to create a level of excitement and participation by people in the vaccination program, even as we work towards a longer-term strategy of public funding to get us the last 10 or 15% of the population over that bar. We're building out a system for demand generation. The idea, and that is to try and build bridges between the work of the Department of Health and the work of civil society, private sector, other government departments. And we have five basic bridges: an open use vaccination brand that people can take and run with, the development of leverage and partnerships that draw on the editorial direction from the Department of Health. We're going to intensify that, but that can then allow amplification through the national networks among those you represent. Getting very practical currency in people's hands: who, what, where, how communication, rather than just the high level stuff that just goes over people's heads. and again, using multiple platforms for that. Capacitated area-based teams locally, bringing together various sectors who don't usually work together to understand what's going on in their community and how they can address it. And finally, working together to make sure that the vaccination experience on site is an incredibly positive one. Both civil society, business, labor, and government have a responsibility in building these bridges. And as Tim has said, we really do need to harness the power of brands to get us over the bar. And we've seen some fantastic examples already. Some companies have opted for a brand affiliation where they've been willing to loan their brand equity to the vaccination campaign. I mentioned PEP just as an example. Pepcore is distributing 10 million brochures, one per transaction through all of the stores, Shoe City, Pep stores, and Ackermans. A very easy thing that where we provide the printed material, they use their distribution networks. We wouldn't have had funding for the distribution, but this just allows us to get into 5,300 outlets across the country at just the cost of production for us. And then there are fantastic examples of companies that are developing their own brands who say, we don't really want the brand association, but we will use our channels. We will use our spaces to drive vaccination. And I mentioned Old Mutual, which I think has done a very good example. And then some have started to look at vaccination rewards and incentives, discount coupons. We know Wimpy, Game, Old Mutual is doing the same. And it would just be fantastic if we were to see companies across the country just using whatever resources, whatever platforms they have at their disposal to amplify the work that the Department of Health is doing, and ultimately ensure that we do cross that bar that is going to secure the future for us and for our children. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, David. I see we don't have any technical questions at the moment about your presentation. So I think let's move on to the next, and then we went to the next sets of presentations and discussion with Andy Rice and Masala Phillips, and then we can deal with any questions as they arise when we get to the Q&A and interactive session in a few minutes' time. Ravi, I will answer you on the chat. There's much work taking place there. Let me hand over to Andy Rice and Masala Phillips.
Thank you, Tim. Masala and I had a brief chat earlier today, and we decided that the answering sequence or the presentation sequence would be that he would go first. I suspect that by the time I'm ready to roll, everything will have been covered, but it won't do any harm to duplicate and re-emphasize some of the stuff. So I think we'll kick off straight away with Masala Phillips from Old Mutual and his presentation on the why of vaccination.
Cool. Afternoon, everybody. So let me just get this up. All right. So thanks, David, for the chat. I think on this part of the discussion, we really want to, appeal and discuss to the brand builders with us, right? And why we're having this chat, because as brand builders, we are the demand generators, we are the communicators. And as David said, that we need to make vaccination mean more to people. And that's the reason why we're having this chat. And it's really about finding the why. And we do this on a daily basis, where we, either product or services, we do find stories that connect with people, and we're able then to convince them of why our products or our services mean meaningful to them. So where we find ourselves is a very interesting position, right? Is that there is a lot of information out there, where we are appealing to the brain, why vaccination is safe, etc. And we still need to, and it's very important we continue driving that communication. But we do find ourselves in a challenge that the stories of, is it safe, people are worried, is that it's not so straightforward. Our role as marketers and brand builders is to really to find those messages that will be able to connect with people's hearts and appeal to the hearts, because we know that once you appeal to someone's heart, they can move mountains more than just sticking to their brain. And it's even more better for us as brand builders that when we find that sweet spot between our brand purpose and also with the needs and the hearts of communities of South Africans at large, especially during the pandemic now. So here's a story. This is my dad, my brother, and my son. So if you see in this picture, is that I'm a COVID survivor, fully vaccinated. My brother suffered long COVID for a long time, developed pneumonia. And my dad, who's over 60 and is an anti-vaxxer. And then as my little son there is 4 years old. And I guess all of us, we want a future for our young ones. But this is a story of South Africans at the moment and of the world. And in this picture, for some of you can relate, but for some of you, you have pictures of family members that unfortunately passed away. And condolences for my side. But this is the dynamic that we have. We are engaged in conversation with friends and family members, those who are pro and those who are against. We exchange videos on social media, from internet, etc., in terms of why is it safe, why is it not safe, this is what happened, and the myths and going around. And it's very clear and apparent that there is a void in terms of, very consistent communication out there. There's a lot of things that are going out. There's a lot of initiatives that people are doing. But what it's apparent and very clear is that we as marketers and brand builders and media owners, it's key that we answer to this for the sustainability of the businesses, for sustainability for our societies at large. So this is our stories. We're not discussing just the medical challenge only. We're discussing family issues. And why should we be doing this, right? Because the social call is clear. And I think the challenge as marketers as well is that there's a business challenge, right? And the business why. You're gonna be sitting in, from this call, hopefully after we have this discussion, you're gonna be pumped up and have ideas, and you're gonna go to the boardrooms in our virtual teams world and trying to convince your business leaders, your business partners, that we need to join in this effort as collective, as brands, to make sure that all of us have a voice on promoting vaccination. But obviously, that will need to come in with clearly establishing the business why, right? For your business, there needs to be a sensible reason why you want to do it for your business. And you need to be convinced why it's important for you to do for your business. As Tim said, it's not just a CSI, because many can look at it as a CSI. And if you look at it as a CSI, I think we're missing a big picture. It is a business imperative that we all pull our hands together, because it impacts the market sizes, it impacts the share growth, customer growth, retention, reputation, and stakeholder partnership. And within all of these points and even more, I think all of us will be able to find a reason. As we're running businesses, it's important that we are clear in terms of why we join forces in doing this thing. We'll be able to show the money to the business, right? So as much as it's important, we form part of the communication, and we have communication that will help in this social dilemma we find ourselves. We need to have a very clear business reason as well why we do that, so that we'll be able to get the support from our business partners. Now, as you proceeding in terms of developing the communication, and you also be picking up on that, well, the importance of being authentic to your brand. And that's when you find that sweet spot and finding that great magic, you know, because it's through the creative communication that we will be able to appeal to people's hearts, but being authentic. So just imagine this two execution that you see in front of you. I really love the Heineken one. You know, if just imagine if Old Mutual did the other campaign and the Heineken one, and Heineken did the Old Mutual one, it will not just be authentic. It will not be relevant. And it's important that not only just we go out with communication that's pro-vaccination, but it needs to feel genuine. It needs to be true to our brand, so that there's that authentic connection. And then that gives us a good reason, an authentic position to speak and encourage. And also, ultimately, it helps us to get support, because ultimately it's about sustainability of our business. And hence, that's why in this call we have a diverse people from different you know, industries, brands. That is a collective effort from all brand builders. Some will be able to help with vaccination sites. Some will be able to help with media, as we have media partners in the call. Some will be able to help with their communication. It is truly a collective effort from all brand builders to be able to do this and come together. Whatever effort, whatever it is that you can do, whatever it is that your brand can do, can be from incentive to communication to helping with media space. Every little thing collectively will really help, right? All of us have our strengths, and it's really about leveraging our strengths to take on thinness. And maybe your campaign will be able to convince my dad. As you can imagine, I've been involved in many discussions with him, sharing information, but he's still not moving. And it's really about the collective efforts. So maybe my campaign will convince your loved one, and maybe your campaign will be able to convince my dad. So this is really an appeal to all the brand builders that let's come together and encourage people and make it easy for people to get vaccinated. So I will pause there and hand over to Andy. Thank you.
Thanks, Masala. Tim, am I coming through loud and clear?
Yes, perfect, Andy. Go for it.
I do have that power cut threat looming over me, which I hope will be avoided. Masala, thank you very much indeed for giving us some powerful stuff about the why, because that's where I really got involved in this issue, was looking at a threat such as the country had almost never faced before, and a very large gap I felt in the tackling of that issue, and tackling of the pandemic, and the social behavior changes that are needed. Now, I accept that social behavior campaigns, whether it's for like David's Love Life, or whether it's from anti-smoking, alcohol abuse, whatever it may be, are the most difficult of all for agencies to tackle. And generally speaking, it's a hard uphill slog, but that doesn't mean that we can't have a really combined effort. And so I really felt there was a vacuum, that there were no sufficient overt endeavors beyond an information supply one. So we had, if you go back, say 1 year, we had an absolute plethora of information and of instructions on the 6 things you can do to prevent contracting the COVID virus. And that's essential. That's the foundations. You can't build anything on top of the, if you don't have that. But there was very little that I could see that was helping people to reconsider their behavior. If we look at those social ills that still endure, nobody needs to be told they should stop smoking. They know all of the the reasons why, and there's a stronger personal reason why they would continue to smoke, and that might be about image and challenge and all sorts of psychological issues. And the same thing happens with all of the other social ills. So I thought to myself, how on earth do we do something about this? And obviously, what we were lacking was any kind of coordinated effort from the brands, from the marketing community. We had some very generous budget allocations, but it either went to strengthening still further the information campaign, or was quite legitimately put behind brand campaigns of their own, which had a connection with the vaccination campaigns, like the Heineken one, like the Old Mutual one, like MTN. There's a bunch of brands, Savannah, out there who have made the effort to do sincere work on giving people a reason why they should be considering vaccination. And what it boils down to is the one single word that I think that brands can contribute more than anything else, and that is trust. And if ever there's a problem in terms of adoption and acceptance of the vaccine, it is one, as David showed in his various segments of people to address. It is the issue of trust. People are not convinced and don't have sufficient trust that this is the right way to go. So brands can bring that through, and people who trust a brand will trust the message that that brand is giving out, as Masala was making very clear. So in my opinion, that was the starting point of the logic of where we are today. But the question, of course, was not just okay. We now acknowledge that we should be tackling the emotional responses, and we should be tackling the reasons why people are saying no, thank you. But we were sure we had a favourable potential response from brands, but we weren't seeing it, other than the shining examples I've spoken about and that Masala has mentioned, and David. So the sort of simplistic solution was, well, let's get what money we can from everyone and put it behind a brand agnostic campaign that will go much further in terms of investment than any small number of brands could contribute. But of course, just having 20 disjointed, strong piece of advertising, yes, but not exploiting the benefit of economies of scale. So the logic therefore seemed to be that we should look beyond the concept of a big national brand funded but not necessarily brand overt campaign into one which is more of a seeding of the ideas into campaigns that the brands are already displaying. So to give you perhaps an example of what I mean that if we were to create a strategically sound and creatively convincing property, a creative platform that we can use and offer to all advertisers to see how they can interpret them in their own brand style and language, then maybe we've got something that will go further than just that one big bang theory. So if you take something like nation branding, then you're getting into the right sort of space in terms of thinking about a concept that more than one industry, more than one marketer can use. So, and I think the best example of nation branding like that was almost accidental, because it was the Australian campaign, which started as a campaign for Qantas Airlines under the message line of the spirit of Australia. And it came quickly to the point where the spirit of Australia was massively recognized as an encapsulation of what they were trying to do as a nation. And it went beyond it being a Qantas line alone, and it became part of the vernacular of contemporary Australia. Another example that Masala reminded me of earlier today was Red Nose Day. Now, Red Nose Day, I think we all know it's what came out of comic relief, and it was using a discipline of comedy to convey a message of social importance. And I'm really just wanting to say that in terms of how we communicate and use the willingness and the enthusiasm of brands to support the campaign, then that way is to offer them a strategically and creatively strong property, which they can incorporate into their own brand advertising, thereby not losing the tone and the style and the nature of their campaigns, and bringing therefore increased trust in what the brand is saying in terms of the benefits of vaccination. And we want to end up in a situation where there is a good answer to that question, why? And it's bound to be emotionally rooted. It's bound to be found in a look at the broadest sense of existence, of living, of family, of all of the building blocks of society, not in the typical product intricacies of some brand advertising. So that's what I feel that we need. We need a spirit of Australia. We need something that can be used with what at South African breweries, there was a debate about the concepts of freshness and consistency in advertising terms. And what we need is to be more than consistently fresh, because consistently fresh means new executions all the time and no building of equity as a result of repetition and reminder, into something that is freshly consistent. So what we're saying is there will be new executions coming up all the time, but they will be consistent because they have the strategic hooks that we want to deploy. And that would be what I'm looking for is campaigns that use that creative platform and strategy, perhaps in quite a minor way, almost like a tagline, as the spirit of Australia was used by many companies, in order to really take us to the point where we can have emotive advertising that really rallies people and gets them to move and to act as advocates and supporters and promoters of the concept of vaccination, so that we can get that remaining 50% that David showed us on the segment, the inertia crowd, the slightly scared crowd, the generally hesitant, perhaps for social reasons. Just get them to actually make a decision once and for all in favor of vaccination. And I think we have the power in the branding community. We have the trust that's there. We have the resources that are there. If we can add to that the thinking on the message to be offered across the board to everyone, so that collectively the trust in all our strong brands is harnessed for the purposes of genuine, significant social behavior change, then I think we will have made the contribution that perhaps the marketing and brand building industry has not yet got to in terms of communication success. So that's kind of my rant, and I hope that it doesn't come across as too much like a rant.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Andy. I appreciate. We're going to skip straight over to Fran, who will just throw some creative provocations, and then we will open up for questions and the dialogue. There's some great questions and debate happening on the chat. Fran, over to you.
Thanks. Thank you so much. Yeah, so I've just put together a small number, a very small number of things that are being done in other parts of the world, and a couple of thoughts from our own country, just to share with you, just as a way of looking at different approaches that brands are taking. Okay. It is asking me, okay, let me know. Sorry, it is asking me to, can everybody see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Sorry, Zoom was asking me to install the Zoom audio device, which I was not of any mood to do right now. So, good. Let me know if you can't hear the sound. This first one is it's the example we were talking about, I think, a little earlier from Qantas, and it's a great example of a brand putting out a vaccination message, but in a way that is on brand, but also it's in the interests of the brand. So just stimulating everybody with the idea of how great it would be to travel again.
It's okay, look, yeah, I'm going to see you soon, okay? Love you.
Is that you, Mum? It's a younger version of me. When can we go to Disneyland? I've been on my own for a minute. Is it only me out there? Searching for the place to begin. Is it me? Is it you? Is it me?
Bloody expired.
So where are you headed? Singapore for a wedding. Taking the kids to Disneyland Resort.
London, going to see someone very special to me.
Hey guys.
Fun you through? Try stop us. Ah, that's the spirit.
I got just the fun space.
Gorgeous.
What would take off? We'll be there soon. So I had a dream that I'd just fly away.
It's just a really great example of a brand staying within its brand identity, actually promoting the interests of the brand, but also putting out a vaccination message. This is another example. This is from Google, again, staying strictly within the brand identity, building brand equity, but still communicating all the benefits of the vaccination, using the device that Google has used for so long in all its video communication. So, I mean, that's great because, again, like with Qantas, the brand is relevant. The brand has a role to play in the communication, but it's also giving a message. And again, concentrating on the good things. The vaccine is a gateway to this wonderful life that, going back to the life we used to live. I think there was a piece of graffiti I saw that said, the vaccine is a gateway drug to concerts, which is marvelous. This is actually a PSA from the French government, very similar approach.
Hold on. Don't let me go. Your first name is free. Last name is dumb. But you still believe in where we're from. Man's red flower. It's an every living thing. Mind use your power. Spirit use your wings. I'm made of the same things.
À chaque vaccination, c'est la vie qui reprend. Faisons-nous tous vacciner, maintenant. Tous vaccinés, tous protégés.
Freedom.
So that seems... I got it from a website, so that was coverage of the actual campaign. That's why there was ticker tape underneath. So that seems to be a fairly common approach, and I don't think we have data yet on necessarily the effectiveness of the approach, but it seems to be anecdotally the approach that a lot of brands have taken, because it gives you a chance, it gives you a chance to have the brand play a role. This is, I think, one of the earliest examples that came out, and I mean, it was a viral sensation. Everybody was sharing it, and again, the brand is central. There's, I don't want to use the word self-interest, but the brand, it's also promoting the brand, because of course, once we're all vaccinated, we can party again, we can drink more beer. So again, just like Google and just like Qantas, this is a brand building campaign. It builds brand equity, and while it's not a direct product sell campaign, the subtext is that for the brand, that the sooner we get back to normal, the sooner we can all enjoy life and we can fly, we can travel again. They've the production values are great. The music, they've put consideration. So these are brand equity building pieces of communication. Even though they have a vaccination message, they've considered the emotive appeal of the visuals, the music, the production values are great. Sorry, I won't. I'd love to play that again, but I really can't. So this is a slightly different approach. So this is from the UK, and this is more about, it's more information heavy piece of communication. And this was done specifically in response to data that they had received that ethnic minorities were more likely to be vaccine hesitant. And so this campaign, and they booked. So they channel blocked. This ran, I think it was for the Telegraph, and they channel blocked. So this piece of communication, this film ran across all the channels at the same time. And they got influencers and celebrities within ethnic minorities to just talk about, to just give across the correct information. I won't play the whole thing, it's 3 minutes. I'm aware we don't have too much time, but I'll give you a sense of how it worked.
Hello, namaste, sat sri akal, assalamu alaikum. This past year has been challenging for us all, with many of us losing our loved ones.
But we will be reunited with our friends and family. All we have to do is just take the vaccine.
Many in our community have suffered the most, largely due to our efforts on the front line at the NHS or as key workers.
Looking after others and serving our community is what we do. It's how we've been brought up.
That's why we have such immense pride when a family member becomes a doctor or a nurse. We have so much respect for them. They need our respect now more than ever.
Today, those doctors and scientists have found us a way forward. A COVID-19 vaccine that will help save lives.
There is no scientific evidence to suggest that the vaccine will work differently for people from ethnic minorities.
In fact, the scientists who developed one of the most widely used vaccines are Muslim.
The vaccine does not include pork or any material of fetal or animal origin.
The vaccine does not contain the virus itself, only harmless elements from it.
Taking the vaccine is the only way to boost your immunity against COVID for you and your loved ones.
The vaccine was available quickly because of a global effort.
Because huge funds were made available by governments around the world.
So something that would normally take years took just months.
It's very, very rare for vaccines to have a long-term side effect. But what we do know is that COVID-19's long-term implications are deadly.
The COVID-19 vaccines have gone through the same strict processes and regulations as other vaccines, such as for measles, mumps, rubella, and TB.
There is no chip or tracker in the vaccine to keep watching where you go. Your mobile phone actually does a much better job of that.
Pregnant women are not excluded from the vaccine, but should discuss their case with a doctor.
There's also no evidence to suggest the vaccine affects fertility.
Herd immunity is not an option, as many millions will need to be infected, causing a disastrous number of deaths.
The vaccine does not change or damage our DNA. Not taking the vaccine can damage us more.
3 of my aunties and 1 of my uncles have had the vaccine.
My mum has had the vaccine.
My dad has had the vaccine.
My mum and dad have had the vaccine.
My parents have had the vaccine.
My mum's had the vaccine and my dad's appointment is booked.
I was initially nervous, but now I've had it, I'm really pleased.
So I think you get the idea there. It's literally using peer-to-peer, in a way, communication, knocking all the myths on the head, but also using insights from the communities to really just address people's concerns head on. And of course the testimonial element where they talk about how they've had the vaccine and their mums had it. This is a slightly different approach, very British. Also giving across the information, and this is from the NHS, giving the right information but doing it with a sense of humour. It's delightful. They're a very English way of just taking the mickey out of each other.
On audition, take 1.
My name is Elton John.
Cut there. Little less showbiz, Elton.
My name is Elton John.
Bit more showbiz.
My name is Elton John.
Let's go for your Michael Caine impression. Just let's see what it's like.
My name is Elton John.
Beautiful. Cut there.
The more people in society that get vaccinated, the more chance there is of eradicating the national COVID pandemic. It's really important to know that the vaccines have all been through and met the necessary safety and quality standards.
So this is the bit where you're going to have the vaccine now, Elton. So
right.
Just kind of pretend that you're having the vaccine from a nurse.
Oh!
What was that, Elton?
That was me acting.
Okay, let's cut there.
And as you can see, I'm still standing. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Wow, okay. Thanks, Elton. We'll let you know.
Oh. Well, at this short notice, you won't find anyone bigger.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Michael Caine. I've just had a vaccine for COVID. It didn't hurt. Not many people know that.
And cut there. Marvellous, that was fantastic.
Thank you.
Sir Michael. Claire, let the little fella know he didn't get the job.
So again, getting across the right information, but just with a sense of humour, and the power also of using celebrities to kind of give that testimonial. Locally, this is a piece of communication that's done by Savannah, again within the brand tone and sense of humour, talking about and again with the characteristic brand sense of humour.
My friend, Ayman. Yes. Nat here to talk about the vaccine. More and more of my fellow South Africans are getting theirs, but there are some who are still worried. It's understandable. But I'd like us to consider some other side effects of the vaccine, the ones that we can be absolutely sure about. But for it to taking the vaccine may lead to living your very best life. Serious. The vaccine may lead to increased relaxation and hugging. Who remembers what that feels like? It's like a hearty plate of mohod, man, for your soul, you know? or increased socialization with your friends and loved ones. Old school chisanya. Where you don't have to worry about the mask on your face or getting any of the sanitizer onto the meat. And traveling again. Never mind interprovincial. I'm not talking about the Free State. Needy Free State, me. I'm talking about finding yourself in a free state. Reclining on the beaches of Jamaica, man. Aye. So please, guys, when it's your time, register for the vaccine and get vaccinated. It's our best shot to get things back to normal, whatever normal you want it to be.
Briefly, we've spoken a little bit about incentives. Various incentives have been tried worldwide with, I think, differing amounts of success. Vouchers, airtime. Washington State gave out free weed, not necessarily recommended. There was a proposal in Malaysia where if you registered for your vaccine, if you got your vaccine, the barcode number became a lottery ticket number. So there's been there are various incentives out there. There's been various things talked about. This is an interesting one for me, where Uber, and they've done it in this country as well, where they offer free Uber rides to people who don't have access to transportation to get their vaccination appointment, which I thought was it's a really interesting approach, because it also allows people to use the brand or to sample the brand. So it's not just a public good, but it also gives people a chance to kind of get access to and use the brand, which I thought was really interesting. I would imagine that in most ad agencies throughout this country, creatives are already thinking about this. I said to Timothy and to Andy earlier, I reckon, because creative people love us a problem. If our agency is anything to go by, there's people in creative departments already thinking about this. We actually just need buy-in, and we need some clout behind it to help us make these ideas a reality. So I think it would be quite easy to start getting some effort going on this, because I think creative people are already thinking about it. And here's a brief thought starter from us. So, one of the problems is people are looking at social media instead of doing proper research. And there's a lot of misinformation online. And some anti-vaxxers are influencers with hundreds of thousands of followers. So how do we combat online anti-vaxxer sentiment and get the right information to encourage people to get vaccinated? So we want to choose, this proposal would be to choose 5 doctors that already have a following and resonance with our target audience, and to actually make them influencers. So we would probably pair them with a top influencer. So we'll find an influencer who has an enormous amount of followers, and with the support of a brand, pair the doctor with an influencer, get the influencers to back the doctors, share their posts, defer to them on their social feeds, and then so I think that's a way of just getting the right information out there. So there's a couple of really cool doctors out there on social media who are spreading the right message, but they just don't have the following of somebody like Bonang. So what if we paired those people with a very, very heavyweight influencer, got the influencer to back them, to coach them, to reshare all their posts, and then the kind of, as the final move, the big play would be to ask those top influencers to take the ultimate stand and unfollow everyone except the pro-vax doctor they're paired with. Because the coolest thing you can do right now is know where you stand, listen to the pros, and get vaccinated. So that would send a really huge statement out as well, that the only people you should be listening to actually are the experts at this point. So, I mean, it would require close social monitoring, strong PR, but it's a thought starter. It came from our creative department. I guarantee you that in all your agencies, there are ideas like this, just waiting to be given a little gas and a little bit of support. So so that was just my last thought. I was looking at some provocations from overseas, and then I just fed that last idea in as a way to say, there's ways to do this, and I think creative people are already working on it. So there's quite simple ways in as well. And I think social media might be quite a key channel, especially if we can build up those medical doctors already on social media, build up their following, give them some clout, give them the kind of audience that they need. Thanks. That's all from me. Thank you, Timothy.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Fran. I know we've stretching the boundaries of the time we set aside. So let's just jump straight into things. Pritesh, please take us away, and also let's deal with some of the questions on the chat and try and make it as interactive as possible in the time we have left. I think clearly we're going to overshoot our mark. So thank you for everybody who is still able to participate.
Thanks so much, Timothy. And thanks for everyone for joining today. So just a reminder, we'd love for all of you to actually take part in this. So at the bottom of your screen, I'm sure everyone knows this, there's reactions, and reactions is raise hand. It's probably the easiest way so I can see who has a question, who has a comment. Just some quick things from my side. And we're going to try and do these questions really, really quickly. Is that this is a shared value initiative. This is a great business opportunity for your business right now to do some social good while still protecting your business. And I think that's what's exciting about this. And through the process, to be able to create creative communication that's going to impact society and impact your brand equity. So it's a win-win throughout. I honestly believe that this is probably going to be, for many of us, one of the most impactful projects that we are going to work on in our career. It's something that's truly going to save lives. And that's not many times in our brands, in our lives, that we'll have the opportunity to do so. So please, if you have any questions, please raise your hands. What I want to do, and remember again, that's under the reactions and there's a raise hand function. What I want to do is tackle some of the questions. Hedi's question has been tackled, but I'm going to read one from Adir from Centauri, who asks, it's a long one. Hi team, this is a great session and good conversations. Thank you for organizing this. My question is based around the risk for brands and communicating or encouraging vaccinations. While I fully agree that it is of the utmost importance that we as brands do our part to communicate for the greater good, there is an element of risk in terms of revolt and lost consumers. We're communicating these messages. Given the rates of vaccine hesitancy here and globally, there has been a case of brands taking a knock when associating with the vaccine and even lockdown restrictions. Do you believe that there is a risk for large consumers in brands in South Africa if they were to promote vaccinations? Again, I believe we need to do this as a country, but we are here to maintain and grow brand sustainability, and the risk of blowback or boycotting would be detrimental to our brands' companies. Thanks. Can I ask maybe also if the rest of our panel, Fran, Andy, Musala, David, if you can also turn your cameras on to tackle some of these questions and see who actually wants to take it. Who would like to take? I think, David, this seems like the perfect question for you to maybe tackle as a start in terms of some of the experience you've seen.
I mean, it sort of brings me back to the early days of the HIV epidemic, and we experienced exactly the same thing. You know, we experienced a lot of companies actually very resistant to come out and stick their necks above the parapet. And the breakthrough was President Mandela himself, who said, you know, if we're not prepared to tackle this issue head on, and you know, and it was very much about sex and culture at that stage. If we're not prepared to do it, then we're basically destroying the future not only of ourselves but of our children as well. And this is that, you know, I think that this is the challenge we have, is that you know, it really is the dilemma of the public good. Unless we all are committed, unless we all come to the table, we're going to slowly erode and whittle down the collective coalition that is needed to combat COVID, because the tragedy of the commons will prevail. We will, you know, we'll all have our own personal interests, but the net effect is that we will all destroy ourselves. So my view is that what we have to do is celebrate those companies that have been brave and have shown leadership at this time, because they are, you know, they are the forerunners. They are actually showing the way, and I do believe that companies have a choice whether to retreat and protect short-term issues and live in fear, or whether they will go, whether they'll cross the line and join those that ultimately are going to be driving the future of our country. And forgive me for putting it as boldly as that, but we actually cannot at this point have companies that are protecting narrow interests, because ultimately those interests themselves will be destroyed as well.
Thank you for that, David. Andy, from your side, as a brand strategist, what advice would you give to Adir? And I've seen other questions like this as well, where the key concern is backlash, reputational damage, and how can they actually tackle this challenge through their communication?
Well, I would just remind anybody who feels that the risk is not worth taking that the famous maxim, the only risk is to take no risk.
Sorry, Andy, you're breaking up a bit. Perhaps if you come off camera, then we'll get better connection.
Yeah, we are losing you quite a bit, Andy.
Yeah,
I cannot hear Andy on my side.
Neither can I. It's very Matrix meets Terminator.
I think, unfortunately, the electricity issues have hit Andy. So maybe Fran, from your side, any advice, maybe taking that on from Andy, from a brand and brand communication perspective, if you do have these challenges, what are some of the key considerations you should have and how to actually tackle, especially concerns where you think there is going to be some potential reputational damage?
I think it's quite hard to actually damage a brand. I mean, if you look back at some of the more notable social media disasters that we have had over the past few years, it's actually quite hard to damage a brand. To get to the point where a significant number of people will no longer buy your brand or will go out of their way to avoid it, it's quite it's not as easy to do as people think. Certainly, with regard to Savannah, we haven't had significant backlash. Sometimes social media can give you the impression that there's a huge noise out there, but a lot of that, social listening and the tools we have at our disposal will show you that a lot of that noise is caused by a very small number of people. I think Heidi makes a very good point there, which is, it's possible in the age of social media to make a lot of noise, but not actually have the numbers behind that. And so we need to be aware of that as brands, that there can sometimes be a lot of noise on social media that's not backed by real numbers. I love how Nike approaches, Nike takes a stand and they're brave and they don't back down. And even when, people start burning their Nikes, Nike don't flinch, because I think for every person who makes a huge fuss on social media, there's probably 10 or 20 that quietly just carry on buying Nikes. So I think we need to be brave and not overestimate the power that people have. Actually, I think it's really, really hard to damage a brand.
I think that's good advice, Fran. And I think what would really damage your brand is losing the people who are supporting your brand on a day-to-day basis. And this pandemic has the ability to do that more than anything else. More than a few voices who go, we are unhappy with your brand messaging out there right now. Excuse me while I lose my voice. Let's move on to the next question. Elsa Chateri says, do we have benchmarks on how communication has been managed in other countries like the UK, who have managed to vaccinate more people and achieve herd immunity? David, this seems like another question that you may want to tackle.
Yeah, thank you. So, I think that the UK and Fran has showed us some of the communication, and they were really, really good in powering up their communication very, very quickly. But I think they did two other things. One is they had clear political spine. They stuck to their knitting, older people first, and they worked down the curve. So we have to give them credit for that. We lost it in the middle. We started vaccinating different public sector groups. It wasn't really consistent with strategy. Fortunately, that changed again, and we have more logic back in the program now. Even as we've opened it up to everybody, there's an intense focus from an access side and an outreach side on older people. But the other thing coming back to international benchmarks is that I think what the UK did well was to very quickly understand why people were not coming forward. So they did a lot of a lot of dipstick survey in a lot of communities, and they found that that the issues why people were not coming forward were very, very banal issues. It was I couldn't get time off lunch. I couldn't find a caregiver for my child, and so they moved quickly to respond to that. So pop up vaccination sites. Bringing it into the workplace, into people's lives, and actually finding that that what seemed to be such insignificant transactional costs in people's lives were significant barriers that had to be overcome. And so I think we need to do the same. I mean, I think I've shown you some national curves in South Africa. We disaggregate uptake down to a sub-district level. But there's no way we can tell you at national level why we're having a lower uptake in a community in Nganduli or in Vembe district. And so really getting down to that level, doing research, using the intelligence that we all have, that your companies have in those communities to understand and feed back, can make a great contribution to shaping both local mobilization and the national approach.
Amazing. Thanks for that, David. Before I move on to the next question, Timothy, I think I'm gonna give you one of my questions from some of the discussions we've had, because I think it's really an important point. There may be some people sitting on this call going, why should I invest my brand's effort and resources behind this when we've already opened up vaccinations to the 18+ age group? It's very likely by the time I've sat with my agency, worked in this, and ready to go to market, there is probably not a need for this anymore. So maybe you can share your thoughts on that.
Yeah, certainly. I think if you can recall back to the slides that David put up about the different sort of quadrants of people, right now, what we've seen is that the people who want the vaccine really want the vaccine. And they are front of the queue the moment their cohort opens. And that's what we've seen, over 60s, over 35s, over 18s. And then it tapers off quite quickly after that. So the idea that we're going to get over 40 million adults to do what we want them to do, to get vaccinated, just by accident, just that it's just going to happen, I think is very naive. And it's hopeful. We would all want that, but I don't think that happens. So we're going to have quite a long tail on this. Now, if it's a fat long tail of people who are not vaccinated or a slim long tail, if we can make it a slim long tail, then it means the majority of the country is vaccinated and we can get quickly to releasing the restrictions, because at the moment, the way policymakers would look at it is that allowing large numbers of people to gather, to consume alcohol, to go on holiday, to do all of these kinds of things is effectively a super spreader event, and that is going to condemn a number of people to die. So that's why these restrictions are there. So if your brand is in any way, shape or form dependent on people being up there, consuming, spending, traveling, any of those kinds of things, even coming back into the office, then the making that long tail as slim as possible is in your very direct commercial interest. The other thing to consider here as well is that, we've got vaccinations now, and there's no guarantee that we aren't going to have to come around for booster shots down the line. So we need to normalize vaccination as just something you do. It's something that you do for yourself, something you do for others, but also something the whole of society needs to do to get a critical mass so that we can get back to the business of living and doing the things that we want to do. And that's not going to happen in a week. It's not going to happen in a month. It's not going to happen in 3 months. This is going to be with us for some time. So I would flip it on its head and say that any company and the brands that company works with that wants to be relevant to the life and lived experience of all of their consumers will need to think about how it orientates itself towards vaccination. And it's not just the brand choice, it's how people come back to work, how they deliver their service, and so on and so on. So if you're just going to hold back and say, well, I'll let someone else deal with it, you're actually missing the opportunity to be relevant. Someone else is going to be relevant, and then you're going to be in 3 months' time going, now we need to do something, but we're 3-4 months behind the curve.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Timothy. That leads well into our next question. This is from Rita Dorothy. So just a reminder, I noticed some people may be shy to want to speak or have your voice here, but feel free to type it out. If you put it in the Q&A function, I'll copy it and put it into my little list and start asking the question to the panel. But if you do want to speak, please raise your hand. Happy to have you share your thoughts. If you have any comments, raise your hand and we'll let you share your thoughts on any of the points being raised right now. So Rita Dorothy typed up a question. She writes, in terms of motivation, our research shows that people are more willing to take the vax for other people rather than themselves. Is this something we could leverage? And Musala, I haven't heard from you. So maybe, with that really powerful example of your dad who does not want to get vaccinated, do you have any thoughts as a CMO in terms of, is there a way we can leverage this idea of, people taking the vaccination for other people rather than themselves?
Yeah, actually, that's exactly the insight that we leveraged when we developed our current campaign that we're running on vaccination with Sisonke, where we're using NS, right? And the whole story that she's telling is that she's taking the vaccine and she got vaccinated for the patients and also for the family and for the loved one, right? And I think it's really and I think if we look at it at the heart of it, for most of the time, we do things for other people, right? So we work so that we can provide for our families. Birthday gifts, we give people gifts, and stuff. So giving and doing something for others is really at the heart and the core of as humans. When we don't have an opportunity to give, our lives feel empty, right? So that truth actually sits right at the core of human beings. So definitely, I think it's one that I think many brands can really tap on doing others. And hey, that's the only one thing that is left to say to my dad, that okay, don't do it for yourself, but do it for us, right? So I'll try that today, definitely.
Thanks for the Musala. And I think it's a good insight. Yeah, sure.
Can I just come in there just with a personal story, which I think there's no one single one-size-fits-all explanation. Different people will respond to different appeals, and that's the great power of the array of brand thinkers and brands that we have here. You might have the appeal that works. Someone will respond to science, someone will respond to something else. Having engaged with this now for 18 months or so at B4SA, what's clear to me is that there's a huge trust problem. And it's, what authority do you trust? So there are some people, and this is what the research is saying, there are some people who fundamentally distrust governments. So if the government might deliver the absolutely perfect message, it will not be trusted. But they might trust their pastor, they might trust their pharmacist, they might trust their doctor. A lot of that trust is social proof. So ignore the authorities. I distrust all these guys. It's big pharma. They're just out to get us and to profit from us. But when I see my friend and my neighbor getting the vaccine and they find, well, actually that proof works for us. So I think we need to think about lots of different ways of convincing people. And now to the personal story, I had a long discussion with, one of my parents who really wasn't into it. I have other family members saying, oh, you mustn't take this and so on. I tried sharing scientific information, all the stuff I get from B4SA, World Health Organization. I approached it sort of in a rational corporate manner. Let me give you a deluge of facts. What worked, I think, was to say, listen, I really want you to be part of my life, and I'm worried about losing you. That was it.
Yep. Thanks, Tim. Yeah, and I think that what more can you say to that? It's really sadly, that is the reality of the situation we're dealing with right now. And if our families and friends who do not want to get vaccinated, truly, we could potentially lose them. And we're doing this for all of us. Let's be honest. It's not just for our business, but for all of us as well. I'm just going to go, Andy, hopefully your network's working again.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Ah, amazing.
Just on that last point, actually,
yes,
there was an MTN campaign quite recently, which I think used the line, if you won't do it for yourself, do it for her, and it made the relationship with people's mothers the focal point. And I thought that was one of the few shining examples of an agency thinking beyond the issue of go and get a jab, and giving people a powerful emotional reason why they should do that, in the same way that Savannah did it for your quality of life and your lifestyle. So I think that's a great message.
Great stuff. Rita, I see your hands up. Would you like to share your thoughts or question?
Thank you so much. I just wanted to respond to Timothy, and I think you're absolutely right that there's multiple kind of motivations. One thing that I have seen, though, I'd like to hear your opinion, is that the motivations that don't work are the ones that say it's your duty to be vaccinated. That actually irritates people because they feel like, you're kind of judging them. So while I agree with you that there's a plethora, I do think that on a very personal level, people that are cautious about vaccines are more willing to do it for their family members, for the people that they love. So I just wanted to get your view on kind of also what are the wrong motivations.
I think I'll hand over to David. He is the sort of country expert on this. But before I do, just my gut feel and everything that I've seen is that when you try and force people to do things, either by frightening them or threatening them, they resist. When you take their concerns seriously, where you don't try and belittle them or ridicule them or anything like that, when it doesn't become a power game to try and win the argument, that then you lower the barrier to accepting an argument. And often if you try and force people, they get into their trench and they defend, right? Because you can always come up with a response. But when you lower that barrier, and that's I think where the brands become hugely powerful, because it's about normalizing things, making it less scary, give more information, respect people's right to ask questions, and we do want them to ask questions. This is a decision that is new. Then you're more likely to win people over. So it's a cultural thing as much as anything else. But David, can I hand over to you, because you've studied this in great depth.
Yeah, Rita, I definitely agree. I think there's some things we mustn't do. I mean, we know from almost all health behavior change and probably all behavior change approaches is that fear-based approaches simply feed into the fatalism that people experience. There are very few examples across the world. Maybe motor vehicle accidents in Australia where fear-based approach worked. But that's probably the only approach where you deliberately set out to terrify people into change is successful. So that's a no-no, and especially in such a polarized society such as ours, where we have a very significant proportion of the population who feel powerless, who feel quite fatalistic over their lives, and it simply reinforces it. It simply just feeds in. So that's the first thing. The second is, as as has already been said. I mean, there is we have a social trust problem in our country. I mean, only, if you look at sort of the index of trust, social trust that emerged from the NIDSCRAM work, only 1 in 3 people in South Africa would fall into the high social trust category. And trust of government is very, very, very low. What is not low is actually trust of health workers. And that's an important distinction. So you may well have a health worker who's highly trusted, especially your local health workers, even if you don't have trust of government and politicians. And the third for me is this issue of power and powerlessness. And there is definitely a reaction across the country, and we see it emerging, and it's emerged in the formative work that we've done, that even positioning taglines as imperatives, positioning it as, as Andy said, go and get the jab, immediately prompts a response that is negative. And so finding ways to go for the gut, to understand the motivators in people's lives and to put it across in an emotive way that Tim did in a very powerful way just now, is definitely going to get us a lot further.
Great. Adira, I see your hands up.
No, guys, I just want to say thank you so much for organizing the session on a Friday. I know everyone's quite busy. Thank you for the responses. Thank you for the insight. I really do appreciate it. And I wish you guys the best of luck and stay safe this week. Just saying goodbye.
Amazing. Thanks for that. And I love that more hands are going up and more comments are coming through. So we'd love to hear all your voices. So feel free to chat and be part of this. I want to move on to the next question from Haiti Brower. Haiti says, love Andy's freshly consistent so much. And these examples from Fran are so exciting. Our challenge is that our population is so diverse and we need to message appropriately for each audience type. And so we need to figure out if we can do a single creative concept and expect it to touch everyone. We need it to touch. And I guess this ties into, Timothy, what you were speaking about. You're not really going to be able to deliver a single creative concept. We probably need multiple. What we need is, it's a quiver with a number of arrows, and each of us holds an arrow in our hand, and we each need to fire an arrow at this problem itself, rather than looking at one big spear to kill it. Would that be an appropriate metaphor, Timothy?
I think it is. And also I think what's important here is that we don't want to set ourselves up as a turnstile that says, okay, this good idea passes, that one I don't like, it doesn't pass. We want the creative genius and commitment of all of South Africa to go into this. I mean, why are we speaking here? I mean, next up I'm going to be speaking to a range of faith groups and so on, who are coming from their perspective. How do they mobilize and so on? So it's quite that. There's multiple different groups. Everyone has to look at what makes most sense for them. It might be internal comms, it might be building the brand externally. There's a plethora of ways of doing this. And I don't think we're going to have all of the answers here. My sense is that we need to, maybe have another session, maybe some more research, taking up some of these questions. Not everybody could have joined this session. I'm open to suggestion, certainly. The one thing I would say, though, and it's just the only note of caution that I would like to give, is that there really are approaches that do work and approaches that don't work. So, having access to people like David and having access to the research around this, now's not the time, I think, for someone to decide, well, they're going to be the second example in history where a fear-based approach has worked. Like we would rather build on the best practice that's there, build on the examples that are there, and make sure that anything you do say is in line with the science. So I think I think that the discipline that any brand would and should apply to its creative executions and its strategies should be just as tight here as well, to make sure that you're not going beyond. And there's a lot of public information out there, and if you want to know, if you want some direction as to where that is, we can absolutely give it to you.
Thanks. I'm going to read a comment now from Andisa and Subhane, because it's such a great comment. There's never been a more opportune moment than this for brands to deliver on their purpose and promise. My sense is 10 years from now, people look back at this moment and remember the businesses and brands that did something in the battle against the pandemic. And I absolutely agree with this. I was having a chat with Timothy about this and go, even as something as simple as having a box of tissues on my desk, this brand is going through this journey with me because it's sitting in the same space. It's the brand that my laptop is made, my phone, the pen I'm using. So our brands are part of this journey, and people will remember what we said about this. I'm going to read the next two questions because they seem very, very interlinked. First, from Hayley Brower, one needs to answer the question of what the backlash is caused by. So this is with regards to vaccine hesitancy. Is it just the real anti-vaxxers? And what is really a small percentage of the population? So trying to quantify that number. And Ravi Pillai seems to echo the same sentiment. Probably efficiency of execution of developed countries versus us led to higher herd immunity. Also, what is the reference doc for South Africa in vaccine hesitancy? David, is there any quantifiable number that we can look at that really tells us what is the true vaccine hesitancy number in South Africa?
Well, there have been, I mean, we're very fortunate that there have been about 5 or 6 different series of surveys that have been done. So, that's useful because it allows us to triangulate. It allows us to really pick up whether, whether in fact the findings are fairly robust. Remember that the struggle we have with any, or the limitation we have with any survey like this, is that it's self-reported. So we're asking people, will you go and get vaccinated? So let's just accept that that limitation. But the main surveys are the NIDS-CRAM panel surveys, and there've now been 5 waves done. And encouragingly there, with each of those waves, we've seen an increase in the willingness to get vaccinated. The University of Johannesburg survey that is done with the Human Resource Council, that's also done in a series. That's also a powerful set that MRC has done. So there are 5 or 6. Only one of those surveys, which I think was done early in 2020, Afrobarometer, showed a lower percentage than the others, which are all showing 67% of people, 2/3 of people putting up their hands to be vaccinated. As I said, we have to now then, we then need to titrate that intent to vaccinate against the factors that actually result in people's vaccination. And that's where some of the motivational issues that Andy was speaking to are ones that we need to pick up on. Now, I just want to answer, I just want to respond to, what is an anti-vaxxer, and I think that there are 2 main drivers of those who are strongly resistant to vaccination, and they are linked. They're certainly linked psychologically, but let me keep them separate. I mean, the one is obviously ideology, and fortunately we don't have the ideological overlay, the strength of the ideological overlay that they have in the United States. So their problem is that the only way they're going to really get to the other 39% of the adult population who's refused to get vaccinated would be if the conservative leadership were to fundamentally change their tune. Now, we are seeing Mitch McConnell and others, have started to do that, but it would take a Donald Trump to change his tune, and I'm not sure how likely that is. So they have a real struggle there. We have an ideological overlay as well that I think has filtered through the conservative evangelical congregations, largely related to the experience of the United States. And so that has percolated through. And so I think, again, engaging with conservative evangelical leaders in South Africa is absolutely critical if we're going to overcome that. So that's the one side. That's the ideology. The other is the natural reaction to fear and the lack of knowing, and we know that psychologically, when people get fearful, they tend to retreat. They're much more likely to be accepting of alternative explanations because nobody else is giving them the proper ones. And so that's where I think there's hope. That's where I think there's a lot of space, that if we fill that black hole that I described there, if we fill the void that is creating that anxiety and a disproportionate amount of anxiety relative to the pain or the real issue of vaccination, I think we will start to reverse. We'll start to erode the adherence to conspiracy theories. We need to go further than that, and we've just commissioned the Center for Analytics and Behavior Change at UCT to do much more sophisticated analysis of the trends. Where are the main anti-vax streams emerging from, and have a rebuttal response. Really, employ social media, employ active people on social media to counter some of these myths and conspiracy theories. Thank you.
Thanks for that, David. I'm aware we're very much over time. So I think I want to move on to this. Haiti has asked a question, which I'm sure is on everyone's minds. For those of us who can't stay much longer, what are next steps, please? Timothy, would you like to look at examples of some of the next steps that you would like to come out of this session and future sessions?
Yes, certainly. So for me, I view this as a conversation starter with the creative and brand industry. I know not everybody is here. So I think if there is demand and interest, we could certainly hold another session like this, perhaps using a lot more of the research. And I think also showing some of the campaign material which is out there and that is available for adaptation. It's already in translation and so on. So show you some of the source material that you might work for. So I think there's that. The other thing that I would very much like is for the leaders of the creative industry. I mean, I come from a corporate, communications is my game. Brand communications is not. So I can't claim a position of leadership in the industry, but I think it would be great if the leaders within the industry were to also come together and help, build some momentum here. I can, as B4SA, we can do a lot to convene people and to bring the experts that you need together. But I think it would be great if the industry itself also sort of picked up the reins of leadership. And the other thing that I would certainly value very much is if the industry also, and this is in your area, I know, if the industry also showed that it took this as something worthy of professional recognition and esteem, and looked to that as a way to also provide some encouragement and recognition. And then lastly, that you go away and think creatively about your brands, about the kind of incentives that might work, and that we keep this conversation going so that we can join up the people in brand and in advertising with the partners that they need throughout the rest of society to make this fly, and that we can help with.
Amazing. Thanks, Timothy. And just to add from my side, as the Luries, we're very committed to this cause and ensuring that people across our region, we serve the whole of the African Middle East region, and we're very committed to ensuring that our entire region is strong and healthy. And therefore, thank you, Timothy and the team for inviting us onto this. one of the things that we have is we have a shared value award that is already part of the Lurie's ecosystem. So if you want to go out and create amazing creative behind your communication, there's a way to take this to a point where you can actually get an award out of this as well. And I know that is not the reason why we're doing this, but having proof within our business that going out then and putting out these powerful societal messages actually has an impact on the bottom line, actually has been considered by the industry in a very thoughtful, well thought of manner, is going to be very, very useful. And that's something that I can share more about over a period of time. But I think what's really, really important at this step is that as an industry, we absolutely have the power to actually transform the direction of society right now. We already can see what's happening. We already can see that there are challenges. And if you look at the graph for South Africa in terms of COVID infection, it should have gone up and gone down like the first and second wave. But this third wave we're in has gone up, come to a halfway point, and seems to have gone up in some weird shape. What we need to do is we need to act right now. And we need to act with the most powerful loudspeaker we have, and that is our creative voice. So if we use our creative voice in a functional way and a powerful way, we can turn this vaccine process from a grudge initiative for a number of consumers into something that they really want to do for themselves, for their family, and for the society. And we'll be able to save all of our businesses in the process. So that's it from my side. Sorry,
yeah, I mean, one of the things I was saying, right at the end of the presentation, when I took you through the idea that one of the things I was saying is I think there's already creative people thinking about this problem. I think in all of your agencies, you're going to find there's ideas percolating. So I think that, it would be about, we've got the ideas, we actually need the backing and the media and the budgets. So it would be, about there's probably already ideas within all your ad agencies. It would be about just having the backing, because we can think of ideas, but we don't necessarily have the budgets or the media spend, or we can't get them out there. So part of the thing would also just be to engage with your agencies to say, have you guys been thinking about vaccine communication? Because I think if you started there, you might find there's quite a few thoughts already percolating. And that's why I shared the idea at the end that we had, because there's already people thinking about it, because that's what we do,
Yeah, that's a great point. Half the work is really done because the idea and ways to crack the problem's done.
Yeah, it's probably already out there somewhere.
Amazing. Timothy, would you like to go through more questions? I know there's a number of questions still coming through, but I'm sure many people need to leave. Timothy, I'll leave it in your hands in terms of how you'd like to proceed with the rest.
I'm happy to deal with the questions. I mean, we've still got 50 people, but I think we've answered a few of them. So let's run through quickly, and we can. I think what's clear is that there's support for another session, and we can maybe again leaning on the leaders within the industry. We moved very quickly here. We pulled this together within a week, and we had well over 100 people. I think it shows that the interest is out there. So what we don't get to today, we can get to another time soon.
Great. So would you like to tackle a few more questions?
Yes, let's tackle a couple more questions quickly.
Sure. So here's one from Mandy Collins, and this is a good point. And she says, I think it's worth noting that people who are hesitant about vaccination are hesitant about this vaccine. They were probably vaccinated as children, and if they have kids, have had them vaccinated as babies or children. And if they have pets, take them faithfully every single year. So it's normalizing this vaccine that has to happen.
I agree, and Mandy works with B4SA, so she's on board, and we agree with her 100%.
Exactly, and that's why and that's why I really liked that NHS one. I think it was just really making the point that this is like another vaccination. It's the same science, it's the same logic. There's nothing different about it. The only difference through the messenger RNA vaccines is that they've gone a little bit earlier in the pipeline, the production pipeline of the antigen process, but it's exactly the same science. So I completely agree. We must use the fact that certainly child vaccination in South Africa is over 91%, 92%, and that is it's a key reference point for a lot of people.
Great. I'm just going to take a comment from Pranisha, who says, being a legal person in the pharma industry, I tried the facts, etc., with some people in my family, worked with the pure facts people, but didn't work with others who are more emotion-based. So I had to change tack with those. Know your audience is key. Proud that all in various stages of being vaccinated now. So Masala, I think this speaks to some of the points that you actually highlighted, that you got to know your audience, and bringing this emotional argument is also key to this. So let's see, I'm just going to go through this really, really quickly. Caitlin O'Shaughnessy, thank you so much to the organizers and speakers for the session. It's been very interesting and insightful. Will we be able to access a recording of this session? If so, where will we be able to access it? Timothy?
So I've answered on the chat as well. Yes, the recording will be available on the B4SA website. We'll also get the presentations and have them available. And we send out a e-briefing every week on a Tuesday, and there will be a link to that there as well. So if you don't want to ferret around on the website, you'll be able to find it there. It's not a huge website, so you will be able to find it. And then I can also share it with those of you that I know and have your emails, then you can get it there as well. So unfortunately, I don't have everybody who's joined email, but I have quite a number of you that clicked through. So you can definitely find it.
Great. And then just, I think the last important comment is from Haiti, which is imagine getting 3 or 5 core campaign concepts as a library for brands to use. But I think this already does exist, right, Timothy?
Yes, so please go and look at COVID comms. You can Google it, you'll find it. There's quite a bit of material there. Likewise, if you look at GCIS, there's material there. And soon there will be also more material from the Solidarity Fund and the NDOH side of things as well. So I think whatever you do, think about your brands. No one's been thinking about that. Quite a lot of people have been thinking and developing material for the central brand, which will be available. So those are resources you will be able to use. And David Little has just put up the COVID comms. In fact, he's from COVID comms. Thanks very much, David. You'll see there's plenty of material out there.
Amazing. Thanks for that. And I think that comes to the last question. And if anyone has, going once, going twice, anyone has any questions, you're welcome to type it or raise your hand.
I think Ravi Pillai had his hand up. I'm not sure, Ravi, if you still wanted to speak.
Hi, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes,
perfect.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry. The question at the time was around, I've already arranged for a pilot of some sort to be done with a national religious-oriented radio station. And this is with my Gordon Institute of Business Science cap on. And the idea was to test the efficacy of a religious leader who is trusted and a health expert panel on a series of 6-week talks. And we're going to monitor the sentiment before the show actually starts on a regular basis till the end, to try and create some kind of understanding of whether that avenue will work. And I know Timothy did respond a bit earlier to say that there is a process with the SACC. But my actual question is, and our colleague from the Department of Health is here. Sorry, I forget the name. But is there a possibility of a partnership or an individual who could join this particular radio station to be the kind of science part or the healthcare aspect to this whole project?
David, I think that's intended for you.
Sure, Ravi. Let me just type in my my email address, and then feel free to make the connection.
And Ravi, one of the things that we are actually looking at, working with David actually and others, is looking to create a larger bank of healthcare experts, so doctors and pharmacists and so on, who are available, trained, willing, and able to speak all of South Africa's languages, so that those kinds of programs can have access to expert spokespeople, and it doesn't have to go through a very narrow funnel of trying to get someone from the Department of Health who is also trying to at the same time roll out the program. So we're looking at ways of coming up with those kinds of resources.
That'll be good, Timothy. It's important that we have that database available so that depending on how this pilot goes, we'll definitely be keen to share the results just to make sure that, we're trying, we rather than theorizing all the time, we just want to do something practically.
Absolutely. And Ravi, I'll touch base with you as well. If you can just drop me a line and I'll put you in touch with the SA Council of Churches, which are not just organizing for the churches, it's the multi-faith forum as well, because they are looking for assistance. They can organize the churches and they can organize the pastors and they can organize the mosques and the temples and those kinds of things. That they don't have as much capacity to communicate.
Wonderful. Excellent. I'll drop you that line, Tim, for sure. Thanks so much
Perfect.
for this very valuable session. I think it's a good chance to get things moving dramatically.
Excellent. Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks, Ravi.
Thank you.
There doesn't seem to be any more questions. Can I hand over to you and then?
Absolutely. I'll keep it quick. Thank you very much, everybody. It's late Friday. We've gone on for far longer. I think that shows how committed everybody is and how important this is. We will do another session. Thank you to the panel for your preparation and your time and your commitment and your expertise. Rest assured, we will draw upon it again. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a wonderful weekend.